if we as fans feel like it's going to be like it's hard to imagine a future without a new Slaughterhouse project, imagine how Crook and Joell feel. Like, they've been pushing for it for all these years, and here we are. Bar for bar album reviews. King Crooked and Joell Ortiz. Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse. Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse is the latest collaborative album from King Crooked and Joell Ortiz, and follows their 2020 collab titled Hard. This album is really just a way for Crook and Joell to essentially close the Slaughterhouse chapter of their lives. And, based off of the title, I guess a lot of people immediately could assume, oh, they're just using the Slaughterhouse name to get attention, and this is just all for money. They're trying to get the bag. But, that might be true. But I think of it more as a way to draw attention to what happened. Because fans have probably been asking. I know I've been wondering what happened to Slaughterhouse over all these years, other than them just kind of drifting apart. But, this is kind of an answer, at least from Crook and Joell. And it's essentially telling their side of the story. And that's an important distinction to make. It is their side of the story and how they feel and their truth. So it's not going to be exactly what happened, and we don't even know if this is the right thing that happened. Like, what if this actually happened the way they're saying it? Because we're not hearing really much from Royce or Joe. All we really got was that one IG live, and that was about it, really. Now, with this album, like I said, they are essentially, just closing that chapter of their lives. They don't want anything to really do with Slaughterhouse anymore, even though they, I guess, still have their share of the group. But this album goes into why that is. The biggest reasons seem to be a lack of communication from people who both Crook and Joell thought were their brothers, and just the fact that, at the end of the day, like, people want to make money, right? Crook came to the table with apparently a 7-figure deal, and he didn't really get a response from Joe. And sure, Joe's retired, but that, like, if this is something that Joe's invested in, and if he's at all interested in, you would expect some sort of communication. Again, this is just from one person saying this. We don't really know how it exactly went down. But what we do know for sure is, Royce didn't want to do Slaughterhouse without all 4 members. Totally fair. Like, I can get behind that. And speaking of Royce, throughout this project, they don't really, at least in my mind, say anything negative about Royce. I think the only thing that was said from Crook was the 3-man couldn't fit into the Book of Ryan, or something like that. Either alluding to neither, or like not having like a posse cut on the Book of Ryan, or just the fact that Royce didn't want to do Slaughterhouse without Joe, which, again, totally valid. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like, I get it. But yeah, that's really all they said about Royce. Most of the things that they're saying is about Joe. Although, I take that back. Joell did mention something on one of the tracks where Royce, I guess, heard something from somebody about Joell, and, people just faking and just talking shit behind people's backs, that sort of thing. So Joell feels like his relationship with Royce is a bit strained as well. And I think they even mentioned it on the live that they didn't really have the strongest relationship to begin with. Crook, on the other hand, has had a pretty strong relationship with Royce and Joell over the years still. So it's a shame that all this is happening and unfolding in front of us. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to take sides with this, because all we have is what Crook and Joell are saying. So, we kind of have to look at it from a different perspective. But with that said, looking at the album itself, aside from the not even shots, but like the mentions of Royce and Joe, it's fucking good. Like they are rapping their asses off on this project, and the production is amazing. It really does feel like a continuation of Slaughterhouse, like that sort of energy, and it just makes me miss the group as a whole more. The project starts off with the intro, the birth, and if you weren't aware of how Slaughterhouse came about, this track does a great job of explaining it. It then goes into the first single, Vacancy, which really just kind of caught everyone off guard, to be completely honest, because in that video, we have them burning the Slaughterhouse shirts. This track itself also just kind of a quick intro to what was going on. Like, oh, well, we didn't want to do the 3-man without Joe. All right, and Joe's busy making podcast money. And then we get to Ain't Nobody Mad, which is kind of funny because this whole, like, you can definitely look at this project as like, oh, they're just upset and bitter. And I don't think that's what they were trying to go for. And they've mentioned it too. Like, they're not trying to sound mad. They're not mad at anyone in particular. They're just kind of tired. So they're exhausted of trying to push for this group to make a comeback. But I love the chorus because like, yo, Crook, why are you talking about that old bullshit? This then goes into the second single, Backstage, which gets a bit more in depth and more into what I feel is really the issue with that Joell and Crook have with Slaughterhouse, or the other two members at least. And that's like, they kind of all acted like brothers, like when they were on tour or backstage. But the second they went home, they just all went their separate ways, which it's a weird feeling, and I understand it. Like, yeah, it's almost like you guys are together just because of the money at that point. Like, what actually brought you guys together if it's not the rapping or you guys wanting to be together? Like, because if you guys actually cared about each other, you would probably talk a bit more outside of this, or like, try to get the group back together, or get everyone on the same page. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I also really do like Crook's verse on that track because it's just carries a whole biblical theme throughout it, and it's just done really well. We then get to Floodwaters, which just is a pretty somber song, and just kind of feels like they're just talking about how they feel about all this. Like, damn, this is really how we're doing it now? All right. And then that goes into Fuck Glass House, which is probably one of the hardest tracks on this album. And it makes sense, because Glass House, it was meant to be their, I guess, second or sophomore album on Shady, and it just never came out. And throughout this album, as well as on this track, we get a reasoning, like a little bit of reasoning as to why, like, they're like, there's a lot of internal shit. And they also mentioned how they essentially had to like lie to fans. They're like, oh yeah, no, it's still coming. Like, don't worry. Like, it's on the way. And it's like, damn, bro. Is it though? Because like they mentioned, like, nah, like, yeah, just Blaze is finishing up the mixes. Like, ooh, maybe that's not the case. We also get Brother's Keeper 2, which has Joell talking a little bit about his past, and I enjoyed it. It almost, like, a lot of these songs just kind of barely feel like it could be talking about Slaughterhouse, and this is one of them. The other one being Smoke, which, Smoke, it almost feels like a leftover from Hard, but I still enjoyed it. But yeah, with Brother's Keeper, we also get a verse from Crook where he's essentially talking to hip-hop and how the industry's going, and it's nothing new, like nothing that we haven't heard from people before, but it's a good reminder, like, the industry's going in a certain way, or the industry works in certain ways, and you just got to navigate through it in one way or another. Another track that actually could feel like it could be on any sort of album is Almighty. It is still a really dope track, but as far as Slaughterhouse references, I guess it's a little bit minimal. Still enjoyable. We then, after Smoke, which solid track still, and the video is really engaging, actually. We have Coastin', which Goes a little bit more into some of the things with Slaughterhouse. Like, damn, like we're just going our own routes. We're just coasting, and like even though like we are all kind of in our separate routes, like y'all try to save face by commenting on posts or liking my photos on Instagram. Like y'all ain't really like that. Like I think this is also the track where Joell mentions like he has mutual friends with Joe, and some of the things that Joe says about him or just about other people in general come to Joell, and he's like, man, you full of it. But with the chorus, we kind of get the feeling of the song, and that's that both Crook and Joell would ride for Slaughterhouse. They would ride for Royce and Joe, but they wouldn't reciprocate it, essentially. I also forgot to mention that Crook's verse on this track goes into some of the things that he did for Joe and Royce, such as paying the bodyguard at a strip club so Joe would be cool, and almost putting out a diss track against Lupe when Royce had that beef. With the last 3 tracks of the album, we get a really good wrap-up of just their thoughts in general. So with those last 3 tracks, starting with Still in My Feelings, you have Joell talking about, again, some of the stuff in his past where he was signed to Aftermath, I guess, and Dre didn't want to have everyone else in that, whoever was in that room, on Aftermath because he saw what Joell didn't see until recently. Then we have Crook talking about how like all these things that he brought to the table and how like people just kind of ran with it and didn't really like. It's not that he was looking to be credited for it, but it's almost like it feels like other people took credit for his idea, which kind of a bummer. The track ends with him and actually Joell, I think, saying like, we aren't the only ones hurt. Mom's was hurt too. And then that goes to Look Mama. And Look Mama's interesting too because it doesn't go into the whole Slaughterhouse stuff, but it's very relevant because, after all that time from Slaughterhouse, I mean, that was kind of early in their careers. I guess at this point it's kind of the middle of their careers, but that was right when they started getting more recognition. So, it was kind of a struggle period, you could argue. But now they're in a position where they're like, look, Mama, I made it. Like, it's a blessing. And coming from where they've come from, where they were raised by single mothers, like, it's a big deal. Like, that was their parent, the person that kind of believed in them when everyone else was like, nah, you ain't gonna do nothing. You're just gonna be broke or selling drugs. And then the final track, Sorry, is essentially just an apology letter to the fans. Like, it's a bummer. Like, it feels like they feel the same way that the fans do. Like, the fans wanted Slaughterhouse to come back together. The fans wanted it, but it just didn't happen. And they're sorry for it. They even mentioned how like some fans weren't able to get all 4 members' autographs on their merch, which is a huge bummer too, because it's probably in reference to that time that Joe was arrested, but also there could be whatever reason that some of the other members didn't sign it. So because of that, they're not able to. Because they're not in a group together anymore. Like, that's not really going to happen. I don't imagine people would want to, or if you take like Slaughterhouse merch to like a live Joe Budden podcast, I don't think he's going to sign that. I don't think he wants anything to do with it. Or he'd be reluctant to sign it. It would just be kind of weird. But as a closing track, it's great. And I think it succinctly explains how they and the fans probably feel. Like, damn, it fucking sucks, but what can you do? Overall, this album was really good, and there was a lot of music that came out this weekend. We had Benny the Butcher, we had Fly Anakin, we had my boy Monty. Like, there were some great albums that came out this weekend, and this is the one that I ended up spinning the most. Like, just over the last day or two. Like I've been listening to this, and I mean Monty's album, but like this one, because I have like an emotional attachment to the group, and this is like essentially their farewell, at least from Crook and Joell's perspective. So having this, I guess it gives me some closure as a Slaughterhouse fan, and hopefully it gives them some closure too, because I think that's what Crook even mentioned. He's like, I just want to get it all out there. I just want to clear it all off and just not even think about Slaughterhouse anymore beyond this, which, to be fair, is going to be rough given he has 3 Slaughterhouse tattoos. If we as fans feel like it's going to be like it's hard to imagine a future without a new Slaughterhouse project, imagine how Crook and Joell feel. Like they've been pushing for it for all these years, and here we are. But with that said, this album's great. My favorite tracks are Vacancy, Fuck Glass House, Coastin', Brother's Keeper 2, and Sorry. But that's all I have for this review. I mean, there's so many thoughts in my head regarding this whole Slaughterhouse issue, but I feel like the internet, and as well as everyone in the group, deserves some time to kind of process it on their own and listen to this album on their own. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you guys want to talk about the Slaughterhouse, I guess, breakup in the comments below, I'll be there. While you're there, like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Also, if you wanted to get a better idea of, I guess, what was going on, at least my idea what went on, check out last week's podcast. I'll link that somewhere in the cards. But yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.